of ridiculous attacks, this one really takes the cake. So let's just focus on some facts. Let me ask you a question. What role did you occupy? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Patel, welcome. Let me first of all say thank you. Thank you for saying yes when President Trump asked you to serve in this role. I think there are very few roles in all of government that are more important than director of the FBI, and there are very few roles in all of government that are more in need of a fundamental change. You and I have both spent much of our adult lives working in and around law enforcement. And the loss of respect from the American people of the FBI and of the Department of Justice is one of the most tragic developments of the last 4 years. Both the Department of Justice and the FBI have a long history of being apolitical, outside of politics, of being faithful to and focused on upholding the rule of law and keeping the American people safe. And in many ways, the worst legacy, in my opinion, of the Biden administration was the complete politicization and weaponization of both the Department of Justice and the FBI, turning them into tools to attack the perceived enemies of the Biden White House. Now, you have been charged with going in and restoring integrity of the FBI. That is not going to be an easy task. But before you can carry out that task, and I am confident you will be confirmed and you will be in the position to carry out that task, you've got to make it through the gauntlet of the Senate Judiciary Committee. And my colleagues on the Democrat side of the aisle, who I don't know how many spots on Senator Tillis's bingo card have been filled, but it looks like he's playing blackout and they're all filled right now. But you will be and have been accused of just about everything they can. But I want to focus on what several Democrats have done recently, which is trying to blame you for the violence that occurred on January 6th, which even in the annals of ridiculous attacks, this one really takes the cake. So let's just focus on some facts. Let me ask you a question. What role did you occupy in the days immediately before January 6th?
Chief of Staff of the Department of Defense.
You were the Chief of Staff at the Department of Defense.
Yes, sir.
So to be clear, you were not rioting at the Capitol.
No, sir.
Okay. Where were you physically on January 6th?
In the office of the Secretary of Defense in the Pentagon.
And what were you doing on that day?
On that day specifically, responding to, preparing to mobilize and deploy the National Guard once we got the lawful request from the local governing authority, which was the mayor of D.C. and the Speaker of the House.
Now, how many days in advance were you working to prepare the Department of Defense to help secure the Capitol on January 6th?
Days in advance, Senator. We were in the Oval Office on an unrelated national security matter with the President of the United States, the Secretary of Defense, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and myself. And the President authorized up to 20,000 plus National Guardsmen and women to secure any security measures necessary related to the Capitol. So we were moving to the fullest extent of the law before the requisite request came from a local governing authority days ahead of time.
And while you were Chief of Staff at DOD, how many times did DOD approach Capitol Police and ask if they needed National Guard assistance?
I believe those letters are well documented, numerous instances, and numerous of those instances, those requests were shut down.
Now, am I correct that the Capitol Sergeant at Arms said assistance was unnecessary?
That's correct, Senator.
Who did the Sergeant at Arms report to?
The Speaker of the House.
That would have been Nancy Pelosi at the time. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator.
And would that also be Chuck Schumer, then the Senate Majority Leader?
The Sergeant at Arms, yes, Senator, reports up there.
Did Mayor Bowser, the Democrat elected mayor in D.C., either request or allow National Guard assistance?
She put in writing on the days leading up to January 6th a declination for National Guard additional support. And that letter is available publicly to the world. So
just to speak English for folks at home, a declination meant she said, no, don't send National Guard. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Let me ask you a simple question, because from the questioning from my Democrat colleagues, they might think otherwise. Do you condemn violence against law enforcement?
All of it.
And by the way, is that true whether the violence is right-wing or left-wing or anywhere else?
There is no discriminating between types of violence against law enforcement.
And do you believe those who assault and commit violence against law enforcement should be prosecuted and should be sent to jail?
Especially those that kill them.
Let me ask you, how many years have you worked in public service?
About 16, Senator.
And how many years have you worked in particular in law enforcement and prosecution and national security?
Over a decade, Senator.
You know, I have to say it is ludicrous but sadly predictable that Democrats are endeavoring to tarnish you, to paint a false caricature based on innuendo and smoke. And so you're working to protect the Capitol on January 6th, and yet they're trying to blame you for the violence that occurred. Let me ask you this just as a straightforward matter. What is the job of the FBI, and what will the FBI's role be if and when you are confirmed as its director?
The simple motto on the website of the FBI's homepage is to protect American citizens and uphold the Constitution. If I am confirmed as the next director of the FBI, that's what we're going to do, and redirect resources to making sure that occurs every single day.
Thank you for your willingness to do so. And this committee will hold you to account on restoring integrity at the FBI. And I thank you also for your commitment to transparency. I think that is incredibly important to bringing back integrity, and I'm grateful for it.
Thank you, sir.
When Ted Cruz said, "This one really takes the cake," the entire voltage of this hearing snapped into clarity, because Cruz was not merely rebutting argument. He was documenting distortion. He was documenting the weaponization of accusation as tactic itself. He was documenting how absolute narrative inversion has become a political instrument in the modern hearing arena. Because here, in this moment, Kash Patel was being accused by Democrats of responsibility for January 6th violence, while standing in front of them having been the chief of staff at the Department of Defense, inside the Pentagon, on January 6th, working to mobilize National Guard deployment days in advance, with written authority from the President of the United States. You can feel the tectonic cognitive dissonance in the room when Cruz walked through that timeline, slowly, clinically, factually, methodically. He asked Patel where he was. He asked Patel what he was doing. He asked Patel how many times DOD contacted Capitol Police to offer guard support. He asked Patel what the Sergeant-at-Arms said. He asked Patel who the Sergeant-at-Arms reports to. He asked Patel whether Mayor Bowser declined additional guard support. And piece by piece, the narrative flipped upside down. That is why Cruz said this one takes the cake. Because the accusation being thrown at Patel wasn't just wrong, it inverted causality. It inverted agency. It inverted timeline. It inverted moral responsibility. And when government power, or political power, or committee rhetoric uses inversion as a shield, as a weapon, as a tactic, we are dealing with a far deeper threat than partisan disagreement. We are dealing with epistemic fracture. We are dealing with the deliberate collapse of cause and effect. And that is how societies lose shared reality. That is how institutions become incapable of accountability. If truth becomes optional, power becomes omnipotent. This is why this hearing is so historically important, because this is how accountability is defended, not by volume, but by forcing the specifics back into the record. Day, time, role, authority, chain of command, written declination, actual law. Cruz forced it into the transcript permanently. And that is why these hearings are the last structural firewall between American self-government and the total narrative vacuum that power requires to escape consequence. And then we arrive at the moral core of this exchange. Cruz did not ask Patel whether he condemns violence selectively, conditionally, partially, strategically. He asked whether violence against law enforcement, any law enforcement, is condemned universally. Patel said yes. No distinction. No tribal filter. No ideological carve-out. Violence is violence. Enforcement neutrality is enforcement neutrality. That is what rule of law means. That is what nation of laws means. That is what constitutional legitimacy requires. And that one exchange, that little sequence, stripped away all the political camouflage. Because the very principle that allows a republic to survive is that violence is never morally justified by political context. The moment violence is filtered through faction, the rule of law ends and the rule of tribe begins. This hearing exposed that line, and Cruz was blunt. The worst legacy of the last 4 years is not disagreement, not policy difference, not ideological conflict, but the loss of respect for institutions that used to stand outside the political battlefield. The FBI used to be the firewall. The DOJ used to be the firewall. And the moral danger we now face as a nation is that the firewall is being replaced with a funnel that channels investigative power toward political ends. Patel said the mission of the FBI is to protect citizens and uphold the Constitution. That is the only acceptable mission. That is the only legitimate mission. And this hearing forced that commitment to be spoken under oath. This is why these hearings matter. Because you are watching, live, in real historical time, the fight for the soul, identity, and legitimacy of American justice itself. You are watching senators drag power back toward constitutional constraint. You are watching what is supposed to be unthinkable become necessary. Public oath-taking that the FBI will not be used as a weapon for faction and narrative control. This is not about personalities. This is not about who sits in the chair. This is about the future shape of American power. Whether power remains tethered to law or whether law is mutated into justification for power. We are past the era of passive civic expectation. We are now in the era where truth must be actively defended, or it will be actively erased. Remember this moment. Remember how suddenly the structure revealed itself. Remember that accountability does not maintain itself automatically. It must be fought for, argument by argument, fact by fact, hearing by hearing. If you believe in the mission of exposing this, if you believe these hearings must not disappear into the void, if you believe moral clarity in government must be documented, recorded, and preserved in memory so future generations understand where the breaking points appeared, then subscribe to Liberty Congress of USA.